A man is dead and a woman arrested after a shooting at an entertainment center in Highlands Ranch.
Well, the father of a man shot and killed by Douglas County Sheriff's deputy says his son was gunned down like a dog.
The officer-involved shooting will be investigated by the 23rd Judicial District Critical Incident Response Team.
That officer will be on paid administrative leave pending an investigation.
Should we talk about policing first? Yeah. Maybe we should pull up the video while I'm kind of introducing this. There's something a little alarming. So obviously, like, content warning. We're gonna show a video that the Douglas County Sheriff released. We'll play it in a second. I just want to frame it really quick with a warning. You're gonna see somebody get killed. And there's something alarming about living in a society like America where we prioritize liberty and freedom over everything. But then we create a law enforcement culture where it's considered anti-police to ask questions about the behavior of the agency. In free democratic societies, technically the law enforcement's focus is not to act out the will of politicians or suppress political opposition or carry out executions or obstruct people's ability to move freely, right? We have this in certain countries in Latin America, the Middle East, Asia, but typically in the United States, law enforcement's role is focused on public safety. And busting criminals, protecting our neighborhoods, and it's not an easy job, but we should still be able to have oversight over the behavior of the law enforcement agency. We should most certainly be able to ask questions about police behavior. If we're not asking questions about the behavior of the law enforcement, then we're living in a police state. And I don't think the United States is a police state, but sometimes it feels like we're on the cusp of a police state when we get jumped on for asking very valid, reasonable, rational questions about law enforcement behavior, especially when we're talking about police-involved shootings that end in fatalities. And I don't downplay the significance of law enforcement, their role in society, all the challenges and complexities that come along with that. And I know there's a number of cities where the law enforcement force has shrunk after BLM and has not returned to the kind of previous employment levels or funding levels, some agencies. And when there's broad systems failures like human health and services and education, and when the economy is tough, when there's unemployment, people probably over-rely on law enforcement or assume that law enforcement can solve every single problem. But I just want to watch this video really quick, and then I want to discuss it with you. And if you're watching right now, share the stream out with your friends, but also feel free to say hello in the chat and feel free to chime in with questions if you have them. So let's watch this video really quick.
That unit, I can't copy your unit number, your muscle.
Hey! Drop the gun! Drop the gun now! Drop it!
Yeah. Okay, that video is so disturbing to me, and I grew up in and around that community. That was in Highlands Ranch. It's been a while. I've lived in Douglas County. I've lived in Lone Tree, near Highlands Ranch. But that video is so disturbing to me. There's people that'll say, oh, you can take it out of context, this and that, but let's just talk about the context. The officer was responding to a call, which I haven't looked at the full investigation just yet, but I believe that multiple agencies responded. There is a sort of multi-agency coordination in and around South Metro Denver or the north part of Douglas County. So we're talking, if you guys are in southern Colorado, this is about 50 minutes north of you. If you're in Denver, this is about 35 minutes south of you. You know, if you're in Boulder, it's about an hour away for all my Colorado people. So we're in Highlands Ranch. Imagine that the officer received a call, and we'll pull the recording because I think that we're going to actually do a little bit more forensic analysis here. Probably said there was some gunplay. I'm not sure how much was clear when this officer was dispatched. But anyways, this officer pulls up to the scene. You can see he's hauling ass. He's in his little SUV. And he gets out of his car and within 8 seconds discharges 6 or 7 rounds into the back of the man that you saw. That man died. And that officer had an AR. It looked like he had his AR ready before he even stopped his vehicle. And the AR has come up a couple times lately because, as you can see, I'm sitting here in Chicago, but I'm in and out of Colorado frequently. And I have been paying attention to some of the officer-involved shootings in Colorado, just because I've been paying attention to the law enforcement in Chicago, New York, and Washington, D.C. So I'm doing a lot of research on the police community and police citizen interaction at protest march. It was a couple weeks ago where an officer-involved shooting in Colorado Springs came on my radar, and I noticed the AR, and I'm like, wow, could you imagine if the New York City or Chicago Police Department deployed ARs in an urban environment? That would be, you know, extraordinary. It would look confusing to people in the city. But in Douglas County and El Paso County, and probably some other parts of Colorado, it's not that shocking that the agency carries a AR or that certain officers carry an AR. It's not that out of control. I'm not that concerned about the kind of weapon, but then I start to think about, like, what is the mentality that comes with an assault rifle? Because to me, it indicates that the officer has some potentially previously had combat training. They don't train that in policing or in law enforcement. But then in the law enforcement, probably has some type of urban training. Some of the chiefs that I speak with say, let's keep the word combat out of it, because there is a big difference between urban military assault and urban police training. But you get a call, you show up to the scene, within 8 seconds, you discharge 6 or 7 rounds into the back of a man who you haven't even identified. And I think this is heinous. I honestly don't care what the justification is. But in my hometown of Colorado Springs, and also my friends in Castle Rock, I actually have many of them. I take calls from Castle Rock and the Springs multiple times a week. I make calls into Castle Rock and the Springs multiple times a week. I had a few people that said it's like anti-police or anti-law enforcement. And then they also use this kind of like gray zone tactic of like, why would you even ask a question? Okay, like asking me why I would ask a question about a police-involved shooting. We should show the video again, but we should get to the point where the officer gets out of the car and discharges his weapon for anybody that's just joining so they can see what we're talking about here. Okay, so this is the body cam.
Hey! Drop the gun! Drop the gun now! Drop it!
Oh my God. Now, Look, just so you know, I grew up shooting guns before most law enforcement ever thought about shooting guns. And before a lot of military went to basic training. I got my hunter safety when I was 10. So we learned a lot of strict rules on guns. Everyone that I shot with was former military. Some were former law enforcement. So I grew up in a pretty heavy military law enforcement community. Again, I was shooting guns at 10. Just thinking about this not as an officer, but as a citizen, okay? That, expects that the law enforcement is looking out for public safety. The cop jumps out of his car. Who knows what his situational awareness is at this time? All we have clarity on, besides whatever statements he issues or the agency issues, is that he got a call. And the context of that call is what prompted him to drive to the scene. And then within 8 seconds, he kills this man. In my opinion, this is a summary execution. Cold blood killing. Like flat out murder of this man outside of this venue. Now, the issue that you're going to have is that the public may preempt the police depending on if anybody had cell phone footage or if there were any witnesses. They may go to the media. Oftentimes, the law enforcement catches the public before there's an opportunity for the public to go to the media. And then the law enforcement has a duty to try to frame the situation in its interest with the public through the media, okay? So this is where the kind of stories and where people start to get triggered and start to get a little bit out of line, because again, if you accept that the government, a government entity, an entity that is employed by the local government, okay, the county, Douglas County, if you accept that an entity employed by Douglas County, paid for by taxpayers, can carry out a cold-blooded homicide in the public, okay? If you accept that, that would be considered pro-police, right? In this very highly religious way of thinking about law enforcement, okay? If you don't accept that the law enforcement can carry out a summary execution in public, in your community, for some reason that's framed as anti-police. Oh, let's drill down further than that. If you support the law enforcement, you're a conservative. If you don't support the law enforcement, you're a liberal. These dichotomies, neither one of them are realistic or accurate, but often this is the kind of like polarized way that people discuss law enforcement. Anyways, that situation in Douglas pisses me off really bad, like really bad. Makes me feel very activated and frustrated. I know how abusive the law enforcement is around the state of Colorado. And I might pull this video of me interacting with Broomfield PD if they still retained the recording, but in the least I can bring the email communications up. I'll pull up another one with Thornton PD, and I'm going to try to grab one from New Mexico PD, just so people can have context on my experience and where I stand. But I know how aggressive the law enforcement is in Douglas County. I know how aggressive they are in El Paso County too. Broomfield County, Boulder County. Now, people had the audacity to tell me that I should do a ride-along and that I need to get more information on law enforcement. Now, a couple things here. One, I started doing ride-alongs when I was in high school with Teller County. And also one of our close friends that we grew up with was the sheriff in Teller County. We also grew up around the kids of one of the former sheriffs in El Paso County. I think I did 3 ride-alongs before I was 19. And I did them in different jurisdictions. 2 of them were in Teller. And then for whatever reason, I've had a love-hate relationship with law enforcement where as long as the police are not fucking around with my First, Second, Fourth, or Fifth Amendment And as long as the reason that they're interacting with me is justified through the binding of the law, and they're following whatever operational and administrative procedures, and we have a consensus that that is the case, I have no problem with law enforcement. But when there is not a consensus that that is the case, that's when I get pissed off. I actually have only had one officer headbutt me. That was Colorado State Patrol. Probably one of the most militant law enforcement agencies in the state. I know there's a lot of good Colorado State Patrol, but I did get headbutted once by Colorado State Patrol, only for asking if he had the right car, which is a valid question, by the way. He's stopping me for a moving violation. Plates aren't coming up hot with a warrant. My car doesn't smell like marijuana. I'm not swerving. We're not talking about alcohol. There's no DUI. Even if there was, right? The law enforcement can assume whatever the fuck it wants to assume. I still got Fourth Amendment, which is a protection from unlawful search and seizure of property. So I don't have to volunteer anything. I don't have to volunteer any accesses to any law enforcement agency, be it local, state, or federal, right? I have constitutional protection. So do you, all of you American citizens. And also, I don't have to volunteer any information. That's called the Fifth Amendment. So even if the law enforcement agency is going to use coercive means or try to create an environment of fear and uncertainty, which they are trained to do in different contexts as a sort of way to extort information, even if there is the presumption of guilt in the law enforcement's head based on their training and the heuristics that they use, guilt is handled by a judge, okay? And I obviously have the right to an attorney. So what I see in this video is a man that has a Second Amendment right to carry a gun, okay? And there was probably a confusing situation that happened at the venue that he was at where there was quite a bit of issues and gunplay. And we're going to pull the dispatch call up in a second, and we're also going to bring that video back into the screen. But my point is, the law enforcement has to clarify the situation. They can't just respond to their gut instinct and carry out a summary execution of what amounts to be a law-abiding citizen that was probably defending themselves from a situation. Now, we live in a society full of guns. We have 400 million guns above ground in the hands of citizens. Who knows how many guns are below ground? Citizens have the right to bear arms. And this is a long-standing conversation that has been backed up philosophically, institutionally, and constitutionally, okay? And we know that there's this gray space where citizens have to decide if they want to carry the burden of militarization. But we do have multiple points in the late 1700s, the mid 1800s, the 1960s, and even more recently, where citizens have been backed by the Supreme Court in their right to militarize, right? If you direct that militarization at the state, that's illegal. That's called sedition. We saw what happened on January 6th. I know that's still a big debate. And if you direct the militarization at, the public or a government entity, that is also illegal, right? But claims of self-defense have been backed up on numerous occasions. So technically, there is a point where you can carry a weapon for self-defense. That doesn't give the police the right to perceive you as a threat. If anything, the law enforcement is as much of a threat to the society or more of a threat to the society if they can carry out a summary execution in the public. And people are barred from asking questions or framed as anti-law enforcement. Let's pull up the dispatch audio and we can talk about that. And then we'll pull up the dispatch audio, and for anybody that just joined, we'll replay the video leading up to the officer getting out of his car.
40 to 34, 60 to 31, copy a shooting at the main event. 64 Centennial Boulevard, the main event entertainment center against 64 Centennial Boulevard. We have multiple callers advising there's screaming and shots were heard. Gunshots from inside the building. Another party advised someone walked in and started shooting. The last unit, I couldn't copy your unit number. That unit, I can't copy your unit number, you're muffled. 4 David 31, confirm your route.
661, break me, and I'll be around code 3. 4 David 41, 6 traffic. Shots fired.
Copy shots fired. All units emergency traffic for the main event, 2363. 6 David 31, I copy shots fired, 2363. 4 David 31, 28.
Is it coming from within or outside? We got a couple of people shot, front entrance. We need multiple people here now. 6 David 31, 4 Robert bus. I know it's not being used for rifle, we're gonna make entry. Possible shooter is down.
Confirmed.
And this is probably a good video that we'll share later, and we'll kind of break this down later, because this is the district attorney's office of, I think it's the 28th Judicial District. They were the ones who had to look at the results of the investigation and also decide if it made sense for them to prosecute. But you can hear the call's tense, right? It's a tense call. It sounds like there is active gunfire. Sounds like the officers are under quite a bit of pressure. So I'm not being judgmental about that. I know that the law enforcement needs the levity to do their job. I just wonder if their job is to make assumptions within 8 seconds about who is who, okay? In the call, they didn't say who was who. They didn't give any cues on spatial awareness. The officer that arrived at the scene that shot this man, he didn't have enough information to fire his gun. Not to mention, he shot the man that he shot in the back. Anyways, my point is, if we can't question the behavior of the law enforcement, if we don't prioritize liberty and freedom enough to question law enforcement when they carry out an execution in public, I think we have a serious problem. Yeah, these are all the gunshot wounds. Holy shit. And remember, the Douglas County sheriff that responded to this call and shot his weapon was a part of one of the statewide tactical units that really got its inertia after the Columbine shooting, but also continued to play a bigger role after the Aurora Theater shooting. It really is a fascinating cross-state body of coordination. A lot of other states could learn from the body that this sheriff works for in terms of like cross-state police coordination, especially for emergency response. But you heard that call. You probably heard a portion of that. He's speeding to the scene. He gets out of his car. Within 8 seconds, again, without any cues or commands or any kind of spatial awareness, he kills the wrong guy. And then obviously, you know, they have this requirement in Colorado where you have to have a third-party investigation by a neighboring agency. They go through the third-party investigation. Those agencies produce the results for the district attorney in this judicial district where we just watched, where we just listened to that call. And they decided not to prosecute the officer. So basically, the law says that the officer is allowed to carry out summary execution. I don't see it any other way. What we saw in that video is that kind of appalling, alarming, shocking, distorted police behavior, where we got to question, like, who is the actual threat in our society if the police are responding to an emergency call with that conviction and certainty and the laws backing them up for killing a citizen.